October 17, 1973. The Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries announces an oil embargo against nations supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Within weeks, the global price of crude oil quadruples. Most industrial nations panic. But for one country, the panic runs deeper than economics. Japan in 1973 imports 99.7% of its petroleum. There is almost no domestic oil, no coal reserves capable of replacing it. No quick alternative. The lights flicker in Tokyo, service stations ration fuel, television broadcasts end early to save electricity. For an island nation built entirely on industrial export, this is an existential threat. What happens next becomes one of the quietest, most overlooked transformations in modern history. While the rest of the world waits for oil prices to come back down, Japan begins rewriting its relationship with energy itself. Engineers, urban planners, and ordinary drivers are pulled into a national rethinking of how machines move, how fuel burns, and how every kilometer can be stretched. 3 decades later, in 2003, 4 Japanese ministries, police, METI, land and transport, and environment, formalized the accumulated knowledge into a single public document. The 10 Recommendations for Eco-Driving. It is freely published, it is not patented, it is not a product, and almost no one outside Japan has ever read it. This video opens that document, not as a list of tips, as a way of seeing the road that took 50 years to refine. Welcome to Oracle Prime. Act 1. The eyes. The first principle of Japanese fuel efficiency is not mechanical. It is visual. There is a concept in classical Japanese sword training called zanshin, a state of relaxed, total awareness. A swordsman in zanshin does not stare at the blade in front of him. He sees the entire field. The hand, the shoulder, the footing, the space between. Japanese eco-driving inherits this idea almost word for word. The most powerful technique it teaches has nothing to do with engines or octane. It has to do with where the eyes go. 1. The 3-block vision. Most drivers operate in what traffic researchers call bumper vision. Their attention is locked onto the car directly in front of them. They react. They brake. They accelerate. They react again. Every cycle of this loop has a hidden cost, and the cost is paid twice. The first payment is the fuel that built the speed now being thrown away into the brake pads. The second is the fuel that will have to rebuild that same speed once the light turns green. In physics, kinetic energy equals 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. Every kilometer per hour squandered into a brake disc must be repurchased through combustion. The Japanese method extends the visual horizon, not 20 meters, 200 meters, 3 city blocks ahead. When a red light appears far down the road, the foot lifts off the accelerator early. The car begins to coast. And here is the first hidden truth that almost no one knows. In every modern fuel-injected car, there is a feature called fuel cutoff. When the foot leaves the accelerator while the car is still in gear, the engine briefly consumes 0 fuel. The wheels keep the engine spinning through the drivetrain. No injection is needed. Releasing the accelerator early to let the engine brake instead of slamming the actual brake pedal improves fuel efficiency by approximately 2% on every deceleration event. Multiplied across hundreds of red lights per month, the number compounds quietly. The technology was already there. The eyes were the missing part. 2. The egg under the pedal. There is a stubborn myth in fuel economy that to save gas, the car must be driven slowly. The Japanese data tells a different story. Slowness is not the goal. Smoothness is. Stomp on the accelerator from a standstill, and the engine's electronic control unit detects the sudden demand. It triggers what engineers call an enrichment event. Extra fuel poured into the cylinders to prevent the mixture from running too lean. That extra fuel does not produce more useful power. It produces heat and emissions. Pure waste. Japan's National Eco-Driving Standard introduced a specific countermeasure with a name: E-Start. From a stoplight, gently press the accelerator and reach approximately 20 kilometers per hour over the first 5 seconds. No race, no crawl, just a calm, deliberate ramp. The mental image taught in Japanese driving schools is simple. Imagine a raw egg pressed lightly between the sole of the shoe and the pedal. The pressure is firm. The shell does not crack. METI's published estimate for this single habit: roughly 10% improvement in fuel efficiency in normal driving. 10% from a foot. 3. The momentum lock. Watch any urban highway during rush hour, and one figure appears in every lane. The driver who weaves, cuts in, cuts out, sprints to the next gap and brakes again. The American Automobile Association has tracked this behavior for years. The time saved by aggressive lane changing on a typical commute is statistically negligible, often under a single minute. The fuel cost is not. According to the U.S. Department of Energy and Oak Ridge National Laboratory, aggressive driving, speeding, rapid acceleration, hard braking can reduce fuel economy by 10 to 40% in stop-and-go traffic and 15 to 30% at highway speeds. Every lane change requires acceleration to create a gap. Every merge requires braking to settle into it. Speed is expensive to create. Speed is cheap to keep. Japanese eco-driving treats steady speed as a resource to be guarded. The concept goes by the name momentum lock. Once a comfortable cruising speed is established, the gap to the car ahead is widened, not closed. Tailgating creates micro-fluctuations. METI's data, shortening following distance to maintain proximity, worsens fuel economy by about 2% in cities and 6% in suburban driving, purely from constant speed adjustment. The road, in this view, is not a battlefield. It is a cooperative system. Every meter of unbroken cruise is fuel saved. That is the first act. 3 habits. 0 hardware. 0 cost. Act 2. The breath. Beneath the dashboard, the engine breathes. It draws air. It mixes fuel. It exhales heat. Every breath is paid for. The second act is about which breaths matter and which ones can be skipped entirely. 4. The 60-second rule. Across the world, millions of people sit in driveways, letting their engines warm up. Idle in fast food drive-thrus. Wait in school pickup lines with the engine running. There is an old belief that engines need to be coaxed to operating temperature before driving. For a 1972 carbureted sedan, that was true. For a vehicle built after the late 1990s, it is not. METI states it plainly. Modern passenger cars do not require warm-up operation. The engine actually warms faster under light load, meaning the fastest, most efficient way to bring an engine to temperature is simply to start driving gently. Idling itself is a different problem. METI's published figure: a passenger car at idle, with the air conditioner off, consumes approximately 130 cubic centimeters of fuel every 10 minutes. That is fuel that moves the car exactly nowhere. The threshold is simple. If the car is going to be stationary for more than 60 seconds, switch off the engine. The fuel cost of restarting a warm engine is far smaller than the fuel cost of continuing to idle. Modern vehicles with auto stop-start systems already do this automatically. For everyone else, the foot makes the choice. 5. Windows down or air conditioning on. A common sight in summer. A driver on the highway with all 4 windows down, hair flying, fuel pouring through the engine for reasons that cannot be seen. The truth depends on speed. At low speeds, city streets, neighborhoods, parking lots, air conditioning is the heavier load. Running the air conditioner with an outside temperature around 25 degrees Celsius can worsen fuel efficiency by about 12%. At those speeds, open windows cost almost nothing because the car is moving slowly enough that aerodynamic drag is minimal. Above roughly 80 kilometers per hour, the math reverses. Open windows turn the cabin into a parachute. Aerodynamic drag rises with the square of velocity. Every doubling of speed multiplies drag by 4. At highway pace, fighting that drag burns more fuel than running the AC compressor would have. There is one further detail that most drivers never use: the recirculation button on the climate control system. Once the cabin is cool, recirculation recools the already cool interior air, asking the compressor for less work than chilling fresh, hot summer air pulled in from outside. Small switch, real difference. 6. The weight and drag tax. Cars accumulate weight the way pockets accumulate receipts. Sports gear in the trunk for a season that ended 6 months ago. A toolbox carried just in case. A child seat from a child who has outgrown it. METI's framework is direct. Fuel efficiency is sensitive to mass. Carrying an extra 100 kilograms of cargo deteriorates fuel economy by approximately 3%. The U.S. Department of Energy reports a similar figure. Every 45 kilograms reduces efficiency by about 1 to 2% in typical passenger cars. The bigger penalty sits on the roof. Roof racks, ski boxes, cargo carriers, all of these disrupt airflow at the worst possible angle. According to studies tracked by the U.S. Department of Energy, a loaded roof box at highway speeds can reduce fuel economy by up to 25%. Even an empty rack, left on year-round, can cost between 2 and 8% at cruising speed. The fix takes 10 minutes and a wrench, yet it is one of the most ignored pieces of advice in fuel economy. 7. The octane trap. There are 3 buttons: regular, plus, premium. The premium button glows brightest. The price is the highest. The branding suggests something cleaner, stronger, more refined. Here is what the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the American Automobile Association all confirm. Octane is not a quality measurement. It is a measurement of one specific property: resistance to knock, the premature detonation of fuel under compression. If a vehicle's owner manual specifies regular 87 octane fuel, putting in 91 or 93 octane delivers no extra power, no extra mileage, no extra protection. The engine simply cannot use the higher resistance. It is the equivalent of buying flame-retardant pajamas to wear in a swimming pool. But there is a quality factor that does matter, and it is invisible at the pump. A voluntary standard called top-tier detergent gasoline, established by major automakers including Toyota, Honda, BMW, and General Motors, requires participating fuel brands to use detergent additives well above the EPA minimum. These additives prevent carbon buildup on intake valves and injectors, the kind of buildup that quietly degrades combustion efficiency over thousands of kilometers. The takeaway: octane is a marketing trap. Detergent quality is a real one. Look for the top-tier label, not the premium price. Act 3. The blood. If the eyes guide the car and the engine breathes, the third system is circulation, pressure, viscosity, flow, sealing, the forgotten plumbing of fuel economy. 8. The cold tire reset. Of all the silent fuel thieves on a vehicle, none is quieter than an underinflated tire. Tires lose pressure naturally, about 5% per month under normal conditions, plus an additional 1 to 2 psi for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature drop. METI's published figure: when tire pressure drops 50 kilopascals, roughly 7 psi, below specification, fuel consumption worsens by about 2% in city driving and 4% in suburban driving. Many drivers wait for the dashboard warning light to act. Here is the catch most people never learned. Under U.S. federal regulation FMVSS 138, the tire pressure monitoring system is only required to illuminate when at least one tire has dropped 25% below the manufacturer's recommended pressure. By the time that light comes on, The car has already been donating fuel to the road for weeks. The Japanese habit replaces the warning light with a calendar. Once a month, in the morning, before the car has been driven, check the cold tire pressure with a real gauge. Inflate to the specification listed on the driver's door jamb, not the maximum number molded into the sidewall, which is the tire's safety ceiling, not its target. 5 minutes a month, 2 to 4% saved on every tank. 9. The viscosity sweet spot. Inside an engine, a microscopic film of oil separates parts, moving thousands of times per minute. The thicker that oil, the more energy is consumed simply pushing it through the system. The thinner the oil, the less energy is wasted, provided the engine was designed to tolerate it. Modern Japanese engines are increasingly designed for ultra-low viscosity oils. 0W20, 0W16, even 0W8 in newer models. Society of Automotive Engineers studies generally find a fuel economy gain of about 1 to 3% when stepping down one viscosity grade, provided the engine is rated for it. The danger is in the other direction. A driver who pours heavy 20W50 oil into an engine specified for 5W30 out of an old belief that thicker is safer increases internal friction, raises pumping losses, and pays for that mistake in measurable fuel economy loss with no protection benefit on a modern engine. The thicker oil cannot reach all the small clearances quickly enough at cold start. The rule is unromantic, but absolute. Use exactly the viscosity printed in the owner manual. The engineers who designed the engine already chose the oil that fits it. The quarter tank rule. There is a habit common in countries where fuel is expensive of running the tank as low as possible to delay the next fill-up. This habit has a price most drivers do not see until the bill arrives. In nearly every modern fuel-injected vehicle, the electric fuel pump is mounted inside the gas tank. It is submerged in fuel by design. The fuel does two jobs simultaneously. It cools the pump's electric motor, and it lubricates the pump's internal veins. When the tank runs low, that protective bath disappears. The pump pulls in more air than fuel. Without coolant flow, internal windings overheat. Without lubricant, mechanical wear accelerates. There is also sediment to consider. The fine debris that settles at the bottom of every tank over years of refueling. A near-empty tank concentrates that sediment around the pump intake. The Japanese had it, echoed by major automotive insurers, including Capital One Auto and Progressive, is to keep the fuel level above 1/4 of the tank at all times. A replacement fuel pump, depending on vehicle, runs roughly $600 to $1,000 in parts and labor. The quarter tank rule is the cheapest insurance policy in driving. The vapor seal. The last leak is the smallest one, and arguably the most absurd. Gasoline is volatile. It does not need a hole to escape. A poorly seated gas cap, a cracked rubber gasket, a missing cap entirely, any of these allow fuel to evaporate straight into the air. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimates that a missing or faulty gas cap can release up to 30 gallons of fuel vapor per year. At current U.S. fuel prices, that is roughly $100 to $120 evaporating annually for the cost of a $15 replacement cap. Tightening the cap until it audibly clicks restores the seal. There is a related habit at the pump that does the opposite kind of damage. After the nozzle clicks off automatically, some drivers squeeze the handle a few extra times to round up to a clean dollar amount. That extra fuel does not always end up where it should. Modern vehicles use an evaporative emission system, the EVAP system, that captures vapors in a charcoal canister to keep them from entering the atmosphere. Forcing liquid fuel past the click point can flood that canister with raw gasoline, destroying it. The repair cost ranges from approximately $500 to over $2,000, depending on the model. Stop at the click, every time. Honest limitations. What these techniques cannot do. There is one part of this story that other videos rarely tell. These techniques are powerful, but they are not magic. A vehicle more than 15 years old, with worn injectors, leaking gaskets, and an aging oxygen sensor, will not match the full economy of a modern hybrid, no matter how perfectly it is driven. Cruise control on the highway already replicates much of what momentum lock teaches. Modern auto stop-start systems handle the 60-second idle rule automatically. A current generation Toyota Prius does by default what a 1995 sedan can only approximate through skill. What the Japanese method offers is not a way to outperform technology. It is a way to recover the efficiency that engineering already built into the vehicle, the efficiency that bad habits actively waste. It is, at heart, a way of refusing to pay twice for the same kilometer. Closing. The Kaizen callback. The reason most people never see real savings is not that the techniques fail. It is that they treat each one as a separate trick. Try one, abandon it when the gauge does not move dramatically, and conclude the whole idea was a myth. Japan's answer to that pattern has its own name, Kaizen. Improvement through small, continuous changes that accumulate over time. 2% on tire pressure, 10% on smooth acceleration, a few percent on idling. Each one alone is forgettable. Combined, sustained, repeated for months, the math compounds. Independent eco-driving studies have measured sustained reductions of 10 to 20% in real-world fuel consumption for drivers who apply the full system over several months. Not the cinematic numbers of marketing headlines, but a genuine, repeatable, measurable shift. There is something larger encoded in this story. Japan imported nearly 100% of its oil and faced an energy crisis that could have ended its industrial future. Half a century later, the Japanese passenger car fleet reached an average fuel economy target of 20.3 kilometers per liter, among the highest in the world. That transformation did not come from a single technology or a magic invention. It came from 50 years of 1% decisions made by engineers in factories and ordinary drivers at red lights, repeating until repetition became reflex. The road tomorrow morning will not look different. The traffic will not be lighter. The fuel will not be cheaper. What can change is where the eyes go, how the foot moves, what gets carried in the trunk, and whether the gas cap clicks. Somewhere in those small choices is the same quiet discipline that lifted a country with no oil into a nation that learned to stretch every drop. The knowledge has been freely published for over 20 years. It is sitting in a public document, in plain language, waiting to be used. This has been Oracle Prime. The past has more answers than the present remembers. Find them, use them, drive accordingly. If this video helped you see your own driving differently, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone whose fuel bill is too high. Until next time, stay curious.